Sometimes,
Right after a particularly nasty part of a hurricane,
The wind calms, the sky clears, and the air warms. The weather isn't just better, it's beautiful. But then just as suddenly, the weather turns wild again,
battering the area with a second super intense burst. This weird lull in a hurricane is called the eye. But why does this lull
exist in an otherwise violent storm.
Let's start in the bathtub. Get why hurricanes have eyes. You have to think of hurricanes as
Masses
huge,
of spiraling fluid.
since in a lot of ways air acts like a fluid.
But hurricanes
are complex.
So complex even.
Scientists have
still.
a lot of questions about what goes on inside So for
them.
now, let's look at a simpler and more familiar example of a spiraling fluid. Water draining out of your bathtub. When you open the drain, the water in the tub starts spinning
moving
inward
faster and
as
faster.
it circles closer and closer to the
There
drain.
all the swirling water converges,
and it has to go somewhere.
unsurprisingly it flows down the
For
drain.
a while, you might just see the water gently swirling. But when the water really gets swirling fast, it starts getting pulled outward, just like kids on one of those playground spinners. And once it gets pulled outward enough, it forms a hollow cone which fills with air. This is pretty intuitive, right? And scientists think a hurricane's eye forms
More
in
or less the same way. There are a few differences.
Of course, hurricanes happen on a much larger scale, kilometers rather than centimeters. And instead of all that converging fluid spiraling downwards,
The converging air in a hurricane spirals upwards.
nonetheless, the dynamics of these swirling fluids are remarkably similar, just like the water in the tub. If the air near the center of a hurricane is
Quickly
spiraling,
enough,
it'll get pulled outward, forming that hollow cone.
And when this happens,
Calm air from above sinks slowly into the cone,
creating a calm core within the violent spiral, an eye within the eye wall. As the air sinks,
it encounters higher and higher
As it
pressure.
gets
closer to the Earth's surface. And as air gets compressed, it warms up at that warmth to the heat that's released by the spiraling eye
And
wall.
a
A hurricane's eye can get more than 20 degrees
warmer
than anywhere else in the storm. Plus, since warm air can hold a lot of moisture,
That sinking warm air clears away clouds and rain.
if you're standing in the eye, you can often see the sun above, which sounds really beautiful. And it is, but when the weather clears, people that have been hiding out for
Often
hours
emerge from their shelters.
and because the eye is tucked into the
center of the violently spiraling winds of the eye wall.
one of the scariest parts of the hurricane is
Is
about to hit basically without warning. So in some ways a hurricane's eye can be a liability. But it can also help forecasters monitor a storm. See, just like water slowly circling a drain doesn't form a clear hollow cone.
A hurricane that isn't spiraling very quickly
doesn't hollow out enough to pull air into its center, so the eye doesn't clear out. But if forecasters watching a storm
see the center begin
they
to clear,
know that the air at the center
spiraling
is
more quickly,
which means the hurricane is intensified.